As fiscal conservatives, we're going to have to explain that to every single voter in every single district out there.
Matt, did you come away thinking it was like managing your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving and just trying to get through the meal without making a scene?
Why do you think there's no real change in some of those numbers, or especially the Trump approval numbers?
What are the things that you're paying attention to that you think happened in the past week that really matter in terms of shaping the midterms? It's Political Rehab, where PTI meets The Daily Show this week. America pays Iran to defeat us. Trump leaves congressional Republicans mystified. A truly bizarre end to the G7 summit. The latest presidential rebuilding project to fail spectacularly. And the 2028 shadow presidential primary kicks in. Plus, we'll debut our new segment, The Battlefield, our weekly look at where things stand for the midterms. Let's get right to this week's rundown. President Trump traveled to Versailles this week to sign what was billed as a peace deal with Iran, but the actual document is not a final treaty. It's a 14-point memorandum of understanding that nominally ends the fighting and launches a 60-day negotiating process for the issues that actually caused the war in the first place. The immediate benefits for Iran are concrete and substantial. The restrictions on Iran's economy begin coming off now, while many of the nuclear questions are deferred to future talks. Matt, I wrote an article on Substack this week saying America just paid Iran to beat us. Do you see it any other way?
The Iran deal will go down in history as the biggest political and military failure of any president in American history. There's no way to look at this other than a complete and total surrender. He bungled the whole thing. We're giving them money to rebuild a country we destroyed. This was a horrible deal for the United States. And all we really got out of it is a pinky swear that they will not try to develop nuclear weapons at some point in time. Look, I think Vance has done a great job at trying to redefine the situation. His press conference this week, where he went in and continued to beat the drum of how this was not surrender, was well done. But this is going to sit on his feet. He is going to beat it when this thing falls apart. And right now, this is just putting lipstick on a pig, hoping that everybody will forget just how bad this thing is.
I just want to make 2 points. One is that signing a peace treaty at Versailles has never gone wrong in history before. Just power move there, Donald. Really, no historical echoes there whatsoever. The bigger piece that I'd like to talk about is this $300 billion reconstruction fund that is in this memorandum of understanding. It's not enough that we're giving them $24 billion up front. Now there's this added fund, which the administration claims is not going to have any government funding in it. It's all going to be private funds, as if that's better. And I'll believe it when I see it. Show me the receipts, guys. But beyond that, how pissed are you right now if you're Ukraine? Imagine if we had started the Marshall Plan if the Nazis were still in power. This is essentially a reconstruction plan for our sworn adversaries who are still very much in power, still very much imposing economic pain on us. We're giving them $300 billion in aid, and our supposed allies in Ukraine are getting stiffed, and they have to pass the plate around to defend themselves from Russia.
Now, I know you are an avid Truth Social reader. And so when
constant.
So I'm sure when Trump posted that he's going to delay the confirmation of Jay Clayton and is refusing to move forward unless Republicans pass the SAVE Act, which means he's keeping Bill Pulte in place as acting DNI. Trump also said Republicans are falling into a trap after Democrats signaled opposition to FISA dispute earlier negotiations. The result is a three-way standoff over surveillance powers, election policy, and who controls the nation's intelligence apparatus. Matt, what is going on here?
This is what I was alluding to at the top when I said that congressional Republicans are genuinely mystified. John Thune, the Senate Republican leader, literally said, I don't know what Trump is doing here. This sure seems to me, above anything else, a cognitive episode for Trump. It seems as if he's forgotten what happened minutes and days ago. I thought that the scariest signal that this is a guy who isn't fully compos mentis was back in that White House meeting about what to do about Venezuela, with all the most powerful people on earth, all the oil executives, and Trump just wandered away to the window to look out at his building project. But I think this might be almost as bad. We have Bill Pulte, who had been soundly rejected by bipartisan majorities in the Senate. Trump saying, no, we have to put him back in. This guy, Clayton, who he was going to bring in to save the situation, he's now holding that up. And Senate Republicans have already said no on the SAVE Act. I don't want to go into all the details on the SAVE Act, but it's another piece of election skullduggery from Trump. There's absolutely no way that Trump's version of this is going to happen. He should know this. Senate Republicans have said no to this before this. This seems to me like a screaming episode of he's not with it.
See, I'm going to take a slightly different. I think this is more of a rope-a-dope. Don't get caught on the SAVE Act. That's not what this is about. This is about keeping Bill Pulte as acting DNI for as long as he possibly can. See, Republicans in the Senate were getting ready to do their job. They were going to actually confirm a nominee in record time, and that meant trouble for Trump. That meant Pulte wasn't going to get his hands in there, wasn't going to dig up the dirt. He needs to change that subject. He needs to get that dirt. He needs to go after his enemies. And this is all about keeping Pulte in there as long as possible.
He wants Pulte in there as his hatchet man. Is that your theory?
Exactly. It needs to be there as long. Yep. That's exactly what's going on here. And if he gets the SAVE Act, great.
Speaking of international intrigue, the defining image of this year's G7 meeting may not have been a policy announcement. It was the closing press conference where Trump delivered a rambling appearance that wandered across topics, lost focus repeatedly, and ended with him unsuccessfully trying to swat a bug, a strangely fitting metaphor for a summit that seemed more focused on managing Trump's attention than solving any global problems. Matt, did you come away thinking about this summit that it was kind of like managing your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving and just trying to get through the meal without making a scene?
You could see it on the faces of every world leader that was there. You could tell every time Trump spoke, it felt like a hostage situation for them. They didn't know quite how to respond to every one of these things. Trump hoped that this Iran deal was going to be that moment that he wanted. But as he talked about it more and more, and as people asked more and more questions, and then after the details got released, it looked like they just kept trying to keep him from blowing up because they knew this bomb was coming. Now, look, there is a little bit of political theater here. And they figured out how to play Trump probably better than anything else, because at least you got Trump now a little bit more on Ukraine, not quite where we'd want him to be, because we still do need to defend an ally. But the entire G7, to me, felt like one big Thanksgiving trying to get my crazy uncle not to say something really weird.
Remember, Trump has come out of meetings, including these pressure situations from European leaders saying, oh, I've got to mouth the right things on Ukraine. Last summer, do you remember his 12-day deadline on Putin? You must reach a peace deal in 12 days or I will give you more time. It was essentially all that was accomplished here. And that means essentially all that was accomplished was nothing. At this point, I'm not sure what to say anymore to traditional conservatives, to traditional Republicans, to non-MAGA Republicans. Thanks for the memories of a former party that you used to have. This is very rough stuff for America, for our allies. And again, if you're Ukraine, boy, are you pissed right now.
Yeah, and you saw part of this, the open mic conversations that they would pick up on leaders where they would talk about Trump. He's in a good mood now. They understood the ticking time bomb and they did not want it to blow up in front of them. But while all this is happening, Trump has created an actual swamp. And by that, of course, I mean his repainted American flag blue Lincoln Memorial reflection pool turned green with algae while he was traveling abroad. And the comparisons could not be funnier. I even saw people on Fox News show up and try to convince me it was blue. Maybe they were colorblind. It looked like a swamp. At the same time, right before the UFC match, they put up curtains so they could pull Trump's name off of the Kennedy Center. And let's not forget all the visuals we have of a big hole in the ground at the White House where the East Wing used to be. The only thing that comes to mind is clean up on aisle Trump, clean up on aisle Trump.
First of all, Matt, I would like to speak directly to those MAGA people who I also saw on the news saying, no, the water's great. All is well. Guys, if you think the water's so blue, drink it. Really, I invite you. You know what? It can clean you out inside. That's the way you get rid of COVID. Yeah, that's what all the scientists say. I would like to suggest that the reflecting pool didn't turn green with algae. It turned green with envy because it was really upset about the giant hole in the ground that Trump created on the White House grounds and all the attention that was getting. And it was saying, hold my green beer. I can do better. And I'm going to have more to say about the reflecting pool in our Dose of Hope segment at the end. So I don't want to step on that. But I am kind of out of things to say to our MAGA friends out there. I really am. Donald Trump was sued more than 4,000 times, mostly by aggrieved former business partners, contractors who he'd hired, people he defrauded, people he stiffed. He defrauded his own fake veterans charity. He defrauded all those poor saps that signed up for Trump University. He defrauded all of those morons who signed up to get a non-existent Trump phone that was never going to happen. He defrauded all of those people who bought Trump crypto, who have borne the losses while his family has made $2.3 billion in gains. He has defrauded and defrauded in every project, especially building projects, that he's ever embarked upon. And buyer beware. At this point, you don't enter into any kind of a project with Trump unless you're really looking to get smacked around. And if that's what you're into, I'm not going to get in the way. Just spare the rest of us.
Elections are about the visuals. Trump put himself out there as a builder, as somebody who can get things done. And right now we have this big, massive, gaping hole in the ground. So we're going to have to do something, which means the American taxpayers are going to be on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars just because Trump decided one day he wanted to bulldoze it for whatever reason. The East Wing is not going to magically reappear, and we're going to be on the hook of it. And as fiscal conservatives, we're going to have to explain that to every single voter in every single district out there. We are depleting trust Americans have with us, and it's going to come back to haunt us.
Did you see the news item this week that internal documents show that the cost of the ballroom was actually going to be $600 billion, not $400 billion, like Trump said, and half of it was going to come from taxpayers? Speaking of being out on the trail, that seemed to be what was happening already with the 2028 presidential election in the past week. The 2028 presidential shadow primary seemed to get into gear this week. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, disclosed that Trump's DOJ is investigating him, and he tried to make hay out of it. His inside camp was kind of quelling about this, like, ooh, this is great. We become a target of a Trump retribution campaign, and boost our fundraising. This will be amazing. Speaking of higher profiles, John Ossoff, the senator from Georgia, also saw his profile elevated this week. Prediction markets now are putting him in the second position after Newsom as most likely to get the Democratic nomination, following several of his speeches going viral and Democrats being to say, ooh, it's a little bit Obama-esque. And J.D. Vance went on a book tour, which really means positioning myself, please, for the nomination, please. He went on The View. He went on CBS Sunday Morning and got a puff piece treatment. And he's clearly trying to get out from under, as you put it earlier, the cement overshoes that the Trump administration experience has put on top of him. Matt, of all of this maneuvering to get ahead of the 2028 presidential process, which maneuver mattered this week? Which one is going to actually make a difference?
I think it's Gavin Newsom. It's interesting because now he's using the Trump playbook. The Department of Justice is coming after me because I am the leading candidate. I am the leading opponent. It's not far-fetched when you look at the Trump administration. And so I think this definitely gave him an edge. I think with Vance, there's no amount of humanizing with a book and his conversion to Catholicism is ever going to change how people see him. The treatment on CBS Sunday Morning was ridiculous. The View, he tried to reference it in his press conference, but that's proof positive that he knows how to negotiate. The truth is there, Marco Rubio is far and away. When the Iran deal comes and pulls Vance down, you see it with conservatives already online that are saying that Vance got a bad deal and that's why Trump is suffering. So I think when you strip that away, the Democrats are the one that's a more interesting story. And what's happening with Newsom is truly setting that stage.
You're 100% right. I completely agree. The book on Ossoff is going to be written in the midterm elections. Democrats are going to want to see how he fares in a purple state. If he comes out strong out of that, then yes, he will have earned that top billing in the 2028 process. Completely agree about JD Vance. He's really coming out of this with a black eye. Of course, he walked into it with two black eyes. No further comment on that. But there is a pattern here where Democrats that have been targeted by Trump for judicial weaponization and retribution have been elevated by it. They've been able to fundraise off of it. And there's an added bonus for Newsom, which is the Justice Department is investigating both him and his wife. There's probably some dirt like there is on all of us. And it wouldn't hurt him for all of that oppo to come out now, come out 2 years before it really matters when you get into actual primaries, have it be old news. So I think this is the biggest gift for Gavin Newsom. Speaking of getting out ahead of elections, it's time for a new segment that we're really looking forward to introducing this week. There's so much political information out there, polls, analysis, news. What we're going to do is we're going to boil it down to tell you what the insiders are actually paying attention to and where we actually stand for the midterms. This is our new battlefield segment.
The polls are shifting. The map is changing. The fight for Congress is on. This is the battlefield.
So, Matt, we're going to set this up in two parts. We're going to look at what the mood is like, what people who are insiders, who are actually on campaigns right now, would be talking about and thinking about and seeing inside campaign headquarters. And then we're going to take a look at the dashboard, where we actually stand. This ties to something that I've written up extensively on my Substack. We have a visual for it. We're just going to give a snapshot of exactly where we are with all of this. So let's start with the first part. What are the things that you're paying attention to that you think happened in the past week that really matter in terms of shaping the midterms?
The first thing I'm looking at is Georgia. Now, within that, yes, you got Mike Collins. He won the Republican primary. He's going to give the Democrats the candidate they want. Definitely makes the Democrats easier to win that or hold on to that Senate seat. But what I'm looking at is the Republican who won for governor. Will Collins start to pull him down?
Are Republicans really worried about that? Georgia has traditionally been pretty strong Republican territory.
I think we've seen a little bit of a change here. Don't forget, I've worked in Georgia. I ran Herman Cain's race when we ran for Senate. Now, that was some time ago, but we've slowly watched Georgia go from ruby red to much more of a purple. And the implications of this have to do with who's going to win governor, what does that look like for redistricting, and how does it set the stage for what's going to happen in 2028?
So there's a whole bunch of dominoes there.
Exactly. If Georgia stays purple, this becomes a real struggle and changes the battleground for Republicans on how we can win the presidency in 2028.
Yeah, it's a good observation. I think what I would see from my side of the aisle is what I just alluded to in the last segment. This is going to be an acid test for Jon Ossoff.
Exactly. The other thing I'm looking at, which I think is also equally important, is there's a super PAC out there that is spending in 4 congressional districts across the country. Now, super PAC spending is not a story. It really isn't. But what's interesting about this is we're testing some affordability messages. It's Virginia, it's Florida, and it's out west. And so it's a nice slice. These are going to run for a couple of weeks, and it's going to tell us a lot about how we're going to try to message in the rest of this midterm.
I agree with you. That's a really interesting one. You're no dummies inside Republican HQ, right? You see that this is the number one issue for voters. Democrats have jumped out to a 13-point approval edge on whatever issue voters identify as their top issue. They're saying by 13-point margin, we prefer Democrats on that issue. And that tells you something because affordability is voters' number one issue, and they tend to prefer Democrats. Let me ask you this. When you test an affordability message like that in swing districts, that's a persuasion message, right? That's not a base mobilization message.
Correct. Right. We are all about persuasion right now because we already know every Republican who's sitting here looking at this map knows that we have a problem with affordability. It's why we got the Iran surrender. Trump all but said it was, I don't want to become Herbert Hoover, is because we know the economy is teetering. We know people are struggling. And so if we just go out on our record, we're going to lose. And so now we're going to try to push a different persuasion message that helps in the midterms.
We were talking before we went on air here about the kinds of ads you're seeing being run in Georgia in the gubernatorial race, and you're saying they are all Trump all the time. That feels like a base mobilization message versus what's being tested by the super PAC in those House districts, which is a persuasion message. Which one are Republicans going to need to go with, base mobilization or persuasion in order to make some headway in the midterms?
If we have any hope of winning the House, or at least not losing it by wide margin, it is persuadable. Look, our base is depressed. I don't mean, oh, they're sad. It just means they're not necessarily going to show up with the same energy that the Democrats are. The Republican base feels deflated. They feel like things are just falling apart. And so this persuasion message is the one that we have to get, because we need those swing voters to come back to us that gave us the job the first place. We're trying to get a good slice in purple and blue states to see if we can actually turn this thing around.
From
Another
the
thing
past
that I'm
week.
watching that I think is really interesting is there's some projections on how much money we're going to end up spending in Texas, Ohio, and Maine. Now,
Mm.
the fact that we're spending a lot of money isn't that surprising. What is surprising is the fact that in Maine, for example, it looks like we're going to double, maybe even close to triple the amount of money that's going to be spent this cycle trying to protect Susan Collins than what happened 6 years ago. And if you really want to know what Republicans care about, you got to follow the money, and that tells you the real story.
But is that a bit of a dog bites man story? As you said, we know that we're awash in money. And I've seen projections of how much money MAGA Incorporated, the Trump PAC, has at its disposal. It's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars more. So it would seem like all that money's going to go to some of these Senate races, right?
See, that's the big fear in our circles, because what we know is that MAGA Inc. money is going to hold it for lawyers and impeachment when we lose the House and Senate. We're not sure that money's going towards any Republicans right now.
So other political consultants like you're not banking on getting any help from Trump.
No, I think MAGA Inc. is hoarding its money. They keep saying they're going to spend the money, but when we're looking at how we're fighting on these seats, we're looking at this battleground, we are not counting on them to do anything. The general feeling right now is that they are going to save that money for lawyers and impeachment, and he's not going to use it to help Republicans.
It wouldn't be the first time that he hoarded money for his own purposes that was ostensibly to help the team. Should we take a look at how all of this stacks up into this week's dashboard?
Yes, let's take a look.
All right, let's pull it up. And this is something that you can see in detail on worthknowing.substack.com. First, I want to take a look at the biggest structural indicators. These are the things that insiders, analysts look at as the biggest tells of what's going to happen in the election. And there are two that you can look at in just about every election: presidential approval rating and consumer sentiment. And both of those, you can see by the upward inclined blue arrow, are tilting toward Democrats over the past week, with Trump's net presidential approval rating going down by almost a point, and the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index, which is the most widely watched and trusted measure of how consumers are feeling about the economy, sitting at its third record low month in a row, also tilting toward the Democrats. The one indicator that's not necessarily as rosy over the past week for Democrats is the generic ballot. That's super important in midterm elections. It just gives a measure of how voters in general are feeling about the parties and who they would like to represent them in Congress. You're seeing a little slippage according to one measure, the Real Clear Politics polling average.
What's interesting, gas prices have dropped. Why do you think there's no real change in some of those numbers, or especially the Trump approval numbers?
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. So I get into this a little bit in the accompanying article with this, but it is true. Since the announcement 6 days ago of the peace deal, we have seen a decline of 13 cents on average, according to AAA, in nationwide gas prices at the pump. But there's going to be a little bit of a lag if there's going to be any effect in presidential approval. You can see that in the polls that are being aggregated into these polling averages. And most of them were conducted either while this announcement was rolling out or beforehand. So it'll take probably another week or two before we start to see a lagging effect, if there is one. Remember, this is just one component of the overall price environment that's really weighing down Trump's approval.
Here's the other question that really kind of strikes me on this. Let's say there is a little bit of a change. How do you see that impacting the trajectory of where Democrats are going to go?
I don't see a major change. We know that gas prices are the most visible component of voters' perception of how affordable life is, about what prices are doing. But remember that there's a time bomb that we've covered on this show before. All of these inputs that end up in our food prices, in our grocery aisle, all of those inputs have also gone up in price fertilizer, sulfur, urea, the kinds of things that are getting bottlenecked in the Strait of Hormuz. Even if that bottleneck opens up, we still saw all of those elevated fertilizer prices baking into the prices that farmers were paying during the spring planting when the war was active. And so that's still going to go off later in the fall. I would expect that consumers are still going to feel a major pinch, even if there's some relief on gas prices. I'm not expecting there to be a huge bump in presidential approval, and I'm not expecting Democrats to do a heck of a lot different.
So I guess bottom line,
even though there's been a little bit of a shift, and you can see some of the ratings that I've reflected, we've baked in now some of the shifts in House districts as they've gone through this gerrymandering redistricting. So there are 5 more seats that are now tilting toward Republicans than there were at the start of the year. I still think overall the week is a draw or tilts slightly toward the Democrats, because there was one major poll coming out of Ohio showing the Democratic nominee, former Senator Sherrod Brown, ahead by 8 points. Now, that's a poll from Fox News. We don't like the news in the Democratic Party that you get out of Fox News. We don't even think it is news, but the polling is surprisingly high rated and accurate. And the noted elections analyst, Charlie Cook, said that he's seeing the exact same thing in the internal polling that both campaigns are sharing with him. So if Ohio is now leaning this strongly toward the Democrats, that shifts the entire Senate map. That is a BFD. And that's why I would hand this week slightly toward the Democrats. Do you agree?
100% agree. I think we're seeing the same thing and where Republican spending is going. I think that's why Trump had to make this deal with Iran, because the economy was going to continue to tank, and his projections of what was his world was going to look like once the Democrats took over on January 3rd was going to be ugly for him. And so I still maintain that I think Democrats are on a path to not only win the House, probably win the Senate. I think if you're a Democrat right now, you should be feeling pretty good.
That sounds like a really hopeful note to end on. And speaking of hopeful notes, it's time for this week's Dose of Hope.
You know what's been my favorite thing about the World Cup? The social media videos from tourists discovering Buc-ee's, losing their mind over Waffle House, videos of World Cup fans singing Take Me Home Country Road while traveling around the country. Scottish fans have practically adopted Boston. They marched to Fenway Park. They filled bars until they ran out of beer. Matt, they ran out of beer. You know how much you have to drink, run out of beer at a bar?
It's called one Hegseth's worth.
One Hegseth's worth. You got Norwegian soccer fans who went viral after performing a synchronized Viking row on an escalator. And you have this Swedish fan falling in love with ranch dressing, saying she won't be able to live without it now. And the TSA having to remind foreign travelers that if you want to take home bottles of ranch dressing, there are limits on how much liquid you can store in your carry-on. But my favorite quote, nobody warned me that American portion sizes are actually a threat to your health. I ordered a medium coffee and received what my country would classify as a bucket. But here's the part that stuck with me. So many of those visitors say the same thing. It's not like what the news portrays. And of course it isn't. Because America isn't just Washington. It's the waitress at Waffle House chatting with tourists at midnight. It's strangers singing together in the streets of Boston. It's Texas barbecue. It's the people who come here for soccer and leave talking about everything else. Judging by those videos, the rest of the world can't wait to experience. People still dream of coming here, still save up to see it. After nearly 250 years, people from all across the world look at America and want to be a part of that story.
As mentioned earlier, things took a murky turn this week as President Trump's latest failed project, trying to turn the reflecting pool on the National Mall to his preferred shade of blue. Instead, we ended up with a color and texture straight out of Dagobah. Slimy, mudhole, my home this is. Video rocketed around social media of workers desperately trying to fix the problem by pouring jug after jug of hydrogen peroxide. That's right, hydrogen peroxide into the water, which, in a stunning coincidence, is also Trump's preferred fix for girlfriends and wives whose hair is too brown. What's particularly delightful about this episode isn't that it was another epic step on a rake, self-own, worthy of Sideshow Bob. It's that it was an eminently predictable epic step on a rake, self-own, worthy of Sideshow Bob, because The Atlantic interviewed a couple of scientists and pool guys, and they said, yeah, you paint a dark color underneath some water when it's hot, it's going to heat up the water, and you're going to get a lot of algae. It's biology 101. This is not rocket science. This is a dose of hope for me, because the reflecting pool is supposed to reflect. It's supposed to reflect what our presidents are all about, whether it's reflecting the stern stone visage of Abraham Lincoln on one side, or the towering monument to George Washington's greatness on the other. In this case, it's reflecting perfectly. It's reflecting the swampy, failing president right back at him, right in his face. And my hope is that it will help just a few more people to reflect on the true face of Donald Trump. And on that note, for Matt, I'm Matt. We'll see you next time.